In this video, I want to go over some Cinema 4D materials and ways to get some different textures, look at some different techniques. I'm going to use a file that I've already created, but maybe from the very beginning, I'll start with just a blank file and I'll just show the process of setting it up, and then I'll show kind of the file that I created. So really what I want to do is just go over, hey, here's an object in the scene. A primitive is like, could be any shape. How do we make a material? I'm in R25, which is the latest version. What you'll need to do is add a material. If you don't see this panel here, you can go up to Window Material Manager, and that's where we're going to manage all these materials. We're going to add a new material. Just press plus. There are different types of materials here, but we're just going to use a standard material. And we'll click on this to access the editor. From here, as a kind of quick introduction, materials have different channels that you can turn on and off. Typically, color and reflectance will be turned on. So color, you can set that color in a variety of different ways. Color wheel, RGB, hue, saturation value, other things like even hex code. So we're going to set a color this way, and then reflectance is something we can either have on or off if you want a little bit of that kind of shine. And you can adjust this to get it like, maybe like a different way, or you can add, you can layer pieces in here. So just to show this process, what I'll be doing in the other file, or what I've already done, is create some geometry, add some materials, and I'm just kind of throwing them on there. So let's go back to the other file that I had set up. You can see for lighting, I have a physical sky that I've grabbed from here, and then I've loaded in a preset sky, which I believe is under basic. Go to load sky preset. I've just loaded one in here. These are some materials that I've worked on, and I want to just go over how I set those up and some of the different techniques I use to get these. So you can see there, I started from the back. I kind of went simple and just turned a few things on, and then I looked at maybe making some brick textures, but looking at ways to get different results based off of different techniques. So the first cube over here is this one right here. If you ever want to see a material, you can just like double click on it, and it should pop up in here, or you can see it selected. So this is just a simple color that I've put on here, red, and it's got some reflectance here. I just kind of showed how I did that. The next one I'm going to look at is this one over here in the middle, and if I click on that, let's double click. This is a gradient, so I just want to show how you could set up a gradient in here. You'll go to the color channel as well, and within here you can actually do things like load images. We're just using a gradient here, but there's other nice things in here like noise, or Fresnel, which is another type of it's kind of like a gradient. But what I did is I went into the gradient, selected it, and if you click inside the gradient like this, you can go levels in, and you can even you could create a different color gradient if you wanted to. Might as well go ahead and look at that. So that's that right there. One thing you should look at is that this has a color and a gradient on it, and they can be mixed together. So you could have just the color, or you could have just the gradient. So this is what that looks like. And you could have in between, like maybe you want that kind of reddish color, but you want like a color gradient also in there. So this is, you can see what that looks like. Within the gradient, there's some other things here. You can change the type. You could go diagonal, radial, circular box. You can even, one thing that's kind of neat is to give it some turbulence so it gets like maybe more organic or more flowy. You could do something like that, and you can. There's other settings in here which are great to play around with if you have some time. So you can see what that looks like. All right, so that's gradient, as I said. I think it's, while we're here, it's worth looking at maybe something like noise, which I think is also pretty powerful. Noise, click on this to get in a level. If you ever want to go back, you could also hit this back button like this. You can go in one level. This takes you back out one level. Sometimes that's helpful. But noise, there's a lot of different types of noise. This is kind of like a blurry noise, but there's ones that look more patterny, or there's something like this that maybe looks more geometric. And you can also bump up the contrast in here or the brightness, and so you can get, you can play around with that. This again can also be mixed as you need to, so you could have a reddish material with that noise on top. You could even change the colors here if you need to. I think scale is also something that's helpful to manipulate sometimes. You can get like really small. Let's get a little bit closer, right? So you could get something like this, or you could, if you wanted a much larger patterning, you could multiply that scale as well. And I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving on. The next cube that we've got is this one right here. Let me close this out. So this one is a material that has the color, which is red. It also has the luminance checked on. So what luminance means light, and what this actually does, it's actually kind of creating, it's lit by this color. So if I have lights in here so I can see things, but actually if I turn, maybe what I should do is turn the light off. And I should say in my render settings, I've already turned off the default light. So I should, when I turn off the sky, I should have no light. So I think everything else is going to be dark except this red one here. This, you can see this is using the luminance channel, so it's emitting some light. And that's what that does. And again, within here, you could even have gradients, noise, all these other things. Some other pieces in here, but just to keep it simple, I think that's a helpful thing, especially if you want like a 3D, like a flat 3D kind of look. This can be helpful. You can turn down the brightness, so you can make it so it doesn't totally blow out. Maybe you have a little bit of again, there's no light in here, so you might not see the edges, but if you wanted kind of like a silhouetted look, this might give you the right style. Okay, so we're gonna back out of here. Let me turn the lights back on so we can see everything else. And the next one we're gonna look at is the brick. To Q3, which is this one. So let's take a look at this material. This is just a brick photograph. I've saved this file out already, and I've moved all the textures into this folder. They automatically get moved in. When you add a file, it'll ask you if you want to move it. So I have some other images in here, but I just want to show. I think this one is just a it's a brick texture, and it's a seamless texture. So if you can search for these online, try to get seamless ones so that they don't have any seams. They look kind of uniform. I think at this point it's helpful to know the way that these materials are being mapped onto the geometry. If we click into here, one thing to look at is the projection style. So if the 3D model or the geometry is done correctly, you can usually just set it to UVW mapping, and that means that's kind of already set up to have the textures mapped. If it was a sphere or something, you might, spherical would probably do a similar thing, but you can look at different types of projections that might change it. So you see I did frontal, which just kind of projects it flat, like the front of it onto this, so it looks a little bit weird. And it's interesting because as I move around, it moves with it. But generally, UVW will work. Sometimes when you download models off the internet, if the coordinates are a little bit messed up, sometimes the mapping is a little bit wonky and you need to fix it. Something to think about. The other thing you could do here is you can actually scale these. So U stands for the horizontal and V stands for vertical. So if you wanted this to be a lot smaller, you can do it this way, or you would scale it the other way, like 200, to make it much bigger. But that's those are hopefully some important things as you're texturing it. If you need to make some modifications, you can even offset things as you need to, if it was a little bit off. But I'm going to leave it the way it is because it actually looks like it fits pretty well. So those settings are accessible once you click on material and go down to the tag down here. So let's take a look at this material. It is created with a color and a reflectance. All we did was bring in that material. We loaded the image, and again, when you load the image, it will probably ask you. I'll just show you something like. I think I already have this, but it'll say, do you want to create a copy at the project location? So you can do something like this, and it should move it over. If you are moving your files around on computers, you want to make sure the textures travel with your files so that they can reference them. You can always relink them if they get broken. All right, so that's that one texture. We can look at the next one here. I'm going to just render this so you can see that. This is just a photographic texture that's tiled. And then this one over here, I believe, is just kind of like a brick pattern that was created, I think, in Illustrator, just some flat patterning, some geometry, and thinking about it's going to be seamless, so trying to get like the edges to match up. Okay, so let's take a look at that brick pattern in here, and this doesn't really need to be checked, but same sort of thing. We just brought in a new piece right there, and yeah, we're ready to go. Okay, so let's move on to the last example here. This is some brick patterning, but this one has some depth into it. So the other two were kind of flatter images, but in this one you can see we've actually got the brick and the mortar kind of like separated by some depth here, and we've got some texture on top of the brick to give it like a little bit more realistic look. So that one is this cube right here. Let's take a look at the way this is set up. Color is set up with that previous pattern I had. So it's actually like kind of a graphic pattern, but where things got a little bit different is we went into bump. Now bump is going to give it that kind of raised texture, or like kind of an overall surface texture, and we're using a noise in here to go back. The way you would do that is go up to this button, click on noise, and we've just kind of pulled the contrast a little bit, and that kind of bumpiness, the blacks and the whites correspond to the elevation of this sort of patterning right in here. You can see that those little blobs, that's the noise. And then the last piece here is some displacement that's being caused by, we have an image here which we've loaded, which is actually just a black and white image of this kind of brick pattern. And where it's black, you can see that it's it looks a little bit more inset, but actually I think what's happening is the white areas are being pulled out a little bit. There's a height in here, 3 centimeters. It's being pulled out a little bit, so it looks like it has a little bit of depth. And that to me feels a little bit more realistic than something that's totally flat. So that's one way to get a little bit more realism in your materials. Again, you can go in and kind of tweak these. I think maybe the last piece to maybe look at was something like a really reflective surface, and I think I've shown this in a previous video, but wanted to show this one more time. We have a reflective surface that's on this sphere right here. I think I haven't fully set this up. It's color and reflectance, or maybe I have. But the idea is to make this sphere so that it reflects the surrounding area. And we can play around with this. I believe the color was kind of like that. If you want it to be really reflective, I found that adding a Beckman layer will make it really reflective, and we can turn down this strength to get it more or less kind of shiny. Here you can see the sky being reflected in the surface, and I think these spheres or curved surfaces work really well at doing that. I think. Oh, it looks like I also put that on the plane here that everything is sitting on, so you can see the reflection kind of come down there. And again, if you want this to be less reflective, you could do that. And if you wanted to, let's say, make it a little bit blurry or noisy, you could also add that through the texture in here. So let me just render or do a little preview of that. This is with the that Beckman layer turned down a little bit, so it's a little bit less mirror ball-y. I think you still get some nice reflections in there. So that's what that looks like. I want to do like a before and after of something really shiny, and then adding some noise to kind of roughen that out so it doesn't feel so polished. What we can do is, again, add in some noise this way. We could scale this up, scale this down. Let's see. Maybe we'll scale it down. So again, it kind of has these maybe imperfections in it. Maybe we could play around with the strength of this. Like this might be a little bit too much, but it kind of has like kind of a marbly look. Let's see. Maybe we bring it. You can play with this, and you can see what that looks like. So you could treat that, and the other thing you could do is load in like a gritty texture. Maybe that's what we should do. I wonder if we bring in a texture kind of like this. It's kind of like a painterly texture. This could give it maybe a little bit more of a roughened look, as if this were more distressed. Yeah, so maybe this is, trying to make sense of this material. It might be a little bit too strong, but maybe that's some kind of roughed, maybe like ice or snow or something it kind of looks like. Again, we could also mix this out. So if this is too much texture, we could pull down the mix strength. So there's a lot that we can do with this to kind of get a more, to tweak the settings to kind of fit what we want. So this is just kind of a quick intro into some materials, and hopefully this is enough to get you started. And hopefully you can start to make things a little bit more detailed, a little bit more sophisticated as you progress through your journey.